Okay, we're talking about Frank. Welcome to the podcast. So we're gonna start talking. We're gonna start by talking about Frank. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and it's basically the idea. And already 5 states have already joined this. It's the idea that states should give the whoever wins the popular vote in the election should become president, and states
Mhm.
should award their votes to that candidate. So that basically would overthrow the electoral college de facto. We just started talking about, and now we're gonna try to recap a little bit what we just said. But if the electoral college needs to be remodeled or not, or if it's still a pretty good model to elect the president to determine who's going to run the country, or if in fact we need some sort of democratic reform. And David had some really good ideas, and Michael as well. I don't know if you guys want to kind of like go through those ideas again. Just kind of give us like the short version, or the long version. It doesn't matter. And I don't know what you think about it, Frank.
Mm. Sure do. Oh boy.
Right, so I guess I could kind of just briefly summarize
Yeah.
what I said. So I think there's pros and cons to both ways. For the electoral college, the pros is you give more weight to the states. So, for example, if California, let's say hypothetically, was 90% Democrat, it's not, but
Almost.
then
Oh no.
no, California is like
Orange County is a thing, buddy.
But okay, so if you did it by
What is it? Is it
popular
like
vote-
70%?
Mm-mm. Not even. I've lived out there. There's a lot more Republicans out there than you would think, buddy.
All right, if you say so.
But yeah, the question is, if you have one state that's very heavily Democratic, should they be getting more Democratic weight than a state that's closer to 50%, or should they be getting just like the same weight? So I think
Hey,
you
Craig.
could. Hey, Craig.
Welcome, Craig.
Sorry.
Good evening.
Go ahead,
just to
Michael.
fill, okay, so just to fill Craig in, we're debating, should we go with the popular vote or the electoral college? And I kind of argue the pros and cons of both ways. I'm slightly in favor of the popular vote, but I'd like to hear what the rest of you have to say.
I'd give it all back to Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's one way to go about it as well. Do you think she would still take the United States back? Would she still be? Yeah, that's cool.
Well, we might have to bribe her with corgis, but sure, I don't see why not.
So David was you brought up a good point, David. Do you want to summarize it?
Well, I think the popular vote is important, but I don't think that the goals of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact address the problems with the Electoral College to my satisfaction.
Okay.
I'm just not persuaded, that's all. And the only reason I'm not persuaded is that this is an issue that the founders argued over. It is the single biggest issue they argued about. And there have been dozens and dozens of proposed amendments with regard to the Electoral College. And if there were more countries on earth whose record in freedom and justice I respect that selected their leaders this way, that would make me more amenable to it. But there's not. There's not to my satisfaction anyway. And you would be surprised at some countries that you think do this that actually don't. England doesn't do it. Canada doesn't do it. France, Germany. In England, a whole half of the House of Commons or the House of Lords is not elected at all.
Do you mean the House of Lords?
Yeah, they're not elected at all. Nobody select the people do not select the leadership in those countries.
And
Who
it shows.
does? Who does for England?
If you're part of the royal family, I don't know how you float up to the top and get selected for the House of Lords, but it's not by way of election.
Well,
Are they
it's
appointed?
it's hereditary.
My
Right there.
point is England is a country whose record with regard to freedom and justice I generally respect. And they don't select their leaders by popular vote. So to me, that's not really the problem. The NPVIC is a good idea, but it doesn't really address the problems.
And what is the problem, would you say?
Well, I don't. I need to back out. I shouldn't be talking this much in my first meeting.
No,
especially-
it's
Oh, no.
All
We've
involved
got-
fine.
met
Everybody's
before.
kind of going
It's
around
just
and
keep your
giving
mind,
their
yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Craig, what's your opinion on the need to reform the Electoral College?
Well, I am in favor of ranked choice voting in all the states, but I think mostly what needs to be done is the states need to have a uniform process of doing this rather than 50 individual processes for doing this. It's not, the 18th and 19th century anymore. And some of the concerns that were in place when the electoral college was put into place have changed, and we need to accommodate that.
Okay, so all right, that's I mean, what just so to clarify just a little bit. So what has changed in your opinion?
What has changed?
yeah.
Well, for one thing, we're not 13 colonies anymore.
True. Yeah.
For another thing, we are a large, highly interconnected population now that in those days where it would take, months
Mhm.
for news to move from place to place, now it takes seconds. And we have somewhat of a different place in world standing now, of course, than we
do you
did
feel like
in
a
the late
greater
18th century.
do you feel like a greater percentage of the people are well informed?
Well informed. I'll say they're informed. I won't confuse that with well informed.
Well, access to information is not the same as the wisdom that comes from it.
Absolutely.
What about you, Frank? What do you think?
I don't know. I think it's fairly obvious. It's only happened, was it 4 times in our country's history that someone has won the electoral and lost the popular vote. And 2 of those times have happened in my lifetime. I'm not that old. So
Yeah.
that just is a practical cost just for me living through history, 31 years old, just to go, something's up here that it's becoming, and I think it's going to happen again within my lifetime. I think more than sufficient means have been met that if we are to, continue any type of trying to present ourselves, even if it's just a facade of being a liberal government, a government for the people, by the people, then we have to act as if we are following the people's will and not a secondary will. Of course, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Republics operate by very different means than democracies. Democracy is just there as a pretty word for electoral areas on the side. It's, But yeah, I would say I don't have a preferred thing to say. You know, I've messed around with ranked choice voting. I actually did it in a group I ran. I had a little election, and I did arranged an entire ranked choice voting thing where I tried to go, oh, if you came to this group meeting so and so times, you have more weight to your vote. And then I would then align the votes, and I would go, okay. And then I'm going to say, whoever went to this place, I can say, you know, you have more weight to vote because you participate more in the possible areas. But
So
yeah, that didn't work.
So when
It
we
fell
talk
through.
about ranked choice voting, I think I know what that means, but I'm sure a lot of people won't be entirely sure. So what do you guys mean exactly by ranked choice vote?
Well, as I view it, it's, you know, you have several candidates and you vote, I'd like this one first, I'd like this one, if that one loses, I'd like this one second, and if that one loses, I'd like this one third. And everybody does that with their list of candidates, and you total it up and you take the weighted sums there, and if someone exceeds whatever specified threshold there is, whether that be 50% or 63% or whatever, then that person is declared the winner. If no one achieves that, what happens is, I believe the least voted for candidate is removed. The votes are redistributed and you recalculate, and you keep doing that until you have one candidate standing, basically, and that one's declared the winner. But that way everybody gets a plan B in essence. That is, if my plan, if my legalized marijuana candidate dies while he's trying to run for election, I have plan B in place to take care of that, and we don't have to worry about doing city-wide ordinances or district ordinances about how we're going to handle this vote, because we've already handled it with our plan A, plan B, plan whatever option.
So in a way, like some people didn't really like Trump and they didn't really like Biden.
I've heard
either.
that.
Yeah, I think I just read recently that Joe Rogan voted for the Libertarian candidate, for example. So but that's just one example. I'm sure lots of people voted for a third candidate. So in that case, you know, let's say you want to vote for the third candidate, but you can also say, well, but if my candidate doesn't win, which he probably won't, I don't want Trump to win. I want Biden to win, or vice versa, right? So you choose Biden a second or Trump a second.
Yep, and as a corollary to that, by the way, it does eventually possibly make third and nth parties viable in this country, which is also something we desperately need. I think the two-party system is another thing that's kind of really.
Let's add that to the discussion, you know, because that's, yeah, I think that's interesting because, yeah, maybe it's not just the electoral college that needs to be looked at, maybe the whole two-party system.
The fact that the founder of our country, the father of our country, George Washington, said it best, where he said, "No country can ever be adequately represented by a two-party system." He called it out right then and there, and yeah, we're still doing this shit. So this is nothing new.
Well, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think the two-party system is canonized in any way. It's not in the Constitution or.
No, it's not.
It's not part of the founding documents.
In no way.
It's more of a natural or unnatural occurrence, you know.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of ranked choice voting for the fact that it encourages third-party candidates, because otherwise there's very little incentive to vote for that third party, because you know your vote is pretty much wasted. But yeah, with ranked choice voting, that third-party candidate, you could put them as your number one, but then if they don't end up in the race, then the way it works is they just slash that out, go to your number two, and then your number two vote goes for whichever candidate. So yeah, a lot of European countries I hear do it, and I think it's better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that because, yeah, right now it seems in the U.S. it would be a wasted vote. I mean, for all intents and purposes, right? If you're choosing in an election for president, especially if you choose the third candidate, you know that third candidate. I mean, there's no way he's going to win or she's going to win. I mean, it's just not possible, at least in 2020, but that applies to 2016, 2010. So, but in that way, like you said, Craig, I like the fact that, well, that could help the system propose other viable candidates. And like you guys are all saying, it's not in the Constitution that we should only have two parties, and it should always be either blue or red, Democrat or Republican. Also, because another thing is, I mean, these parties are pretty uninspired at this point. The Democrat Party and the Republican Party, they have like these ideological, doctrines, and they're just very stale.
Well, I'm an independent, not because I can't tell the difference between the Democrats and Republicans, but because I can.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by
Yeah,
that? I know what you mean by that, but just give us a little bit more.
No, I mean,
Hey, Shashir.
I don't like the.
Hi, Sashir.
I'm not drawn to the extremist views on either end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think they're all crazy.
Sorry, I just came from another Zoom meetup, so from
Oh,
one meetup to another.
Mr. Popular.
oh,
It was a college rivalry meetup, so
oh
Awesome.
boy.
I have Berkeley Top Dog has my background right now.
Hey, Berserkly. All right.
So,
Yes,
Sashir,
exactly, yes.
we started kind of political here. Just.
Oh, wait! I'm never political. I'm the most unpolitical.
Oh
person.
shit!
Sashir only likes to talk about political stuff, so that's good.
I only like to talk about art history, actually.
Art
I'll be
history.
right back,
We
Andy
should talk
Murphy.
about some art history. We should
We
talk
actually
about
should.
it.
That's where it's at, man.
But basically, so we're talking about the Electoral College. Do we need to reform the Electoral College or not? Also, the two-party system. Should we reform the two-party system? And that's kind of like the start of the discussion.
and ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting, if that would improve things. So those are the things we're talking about so far.
Well, there is a thing. There's a state compact that's trying to get around the.
We talked about that, yeah.
Did you? Okay, fine. I'm way
What do you
behind.
think about that? What do you think about that? That's a good start.
I think it's a good thing. I will actually. I've got very mixed opinions about the Electoral College. I say that I will actually speak in some defense of the Electoral College.
Okay, give us a defense of the Electoral College, because most people are attacking it.
It is pretty
Well,
much
kind
has to do
of,
with
yeah.
that small states would not, and has a state of. As we live in a state that has like half the population of the city of New York, it actually does benefit.
Yeah.
It does benefit Minnesota. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
the attention given to some of the smaller states would not be there. Now, granted, we'd still have senators. I mean, that's a big advantage. But in terms of campaign or any other president paying lip service, yeah, they might kind of pass us over.
I mean, I already think they kind of do pass us over because we're not Ohio, Pennsylvania, or Florida. Given what has happened with the last election, that paradigm may change a little bit, but Minnesota wasn't even counted for Hillary before she seceded. We weren't even considered. So,
Well, the opposite side of that argument, Sashir, and I'm not saying you're wrong at all, but another way to look at it is a sort of like pernicious effect of what you just described. The bad side of that argument is that important states, very important states like California, New York, Illinois, Washington, and so on, they become not very important, really. Like like if you live in New York, which is a state of 20 something million people, it doesn't really matter where you vote. It's irrelevant, because at the end of the day, it's going to go Democrat. And you end up with a relatively small part of the country. And Minnesota, again, I mean, Minnesota is a little bit more relevant, but, very likely Minnesota is going to vote Democrat.
as
But
in, like, for-
yeah, I mean, if you're in Wisconsin and 3 or 4 other states or 5 states, those are really the states that matter. And people that live in other places, they, in a way, they don't really have a voice. Like if you're in California and if you're Republican, I mean, you can like Trump as much as you want, but I mean, you're not gonna, like, if you vote for Trump, it's you might as well not vote because it's just not gonna happen, right?
Yeah,
So,
although California did okay by Ronald Reagan, so I don't know that
yeah, and yeah,
I
you
would
might
go with
you
that.
might say that, and yeah, but I do think
Hey, Carolyn.
that's sort of a problem, that you concentrate the decision making in a relatively small amount of states. And I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, but I think that's kind of true.
Yeah, but I'm saying though 30 years ago, California was a swing state. 40 years ago, California was a red state. In the mid 80s,
Mhm.
it was a reliably red state.
Yep.
Things can change. It's not necessarily fixed.
They,
I'm
they,
saying who
they do
would have
change.
thought?
I'm counting on it.
I mean, who would have thought Georgia would go blue this year?
I wouldn't have. That was actually a surprise for me. That completely caught me off guard.
And I believe the reporting on that was the Biden got, what was it, 30% of the white vote in Georgia. So I think we know how that changed, right? So
But it's true, yeah. Most people didn't expect that state to change, yeah.
I was completely banking on Pennsylvania. That's where it was. But yeah.
I mean, Arizona 2 years ago had 2 Republican senators. Now they have 2 Democrat senators. Things do change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although I don't feel like
that's a good argument.
the stagnation is the problem here. I think the problem is our government representing the people, or is it simply representing a doctrine that has been in place to keep the doctrine in place, regardless if it does its duties or does what it wants us to do.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Frank.
The idea is, are we keeping the electoral college in place because we feel it represents us and it expresses who we are as a people in the government, and it allows us to see our ends in it, which would be like the liberal ends? Or are we just simply saying this is an ideal that was formulated by those who founded it, and we're keeping the ideal going? Because that'd be more of an authoritarian idea. That's actually a Hobbesian sovereign concept right there.
I mean, the purpose of a bureaucracy is to resist change, right? And that's almost its stock and trade, is the bureaucracy gets into place.
The purpose of the Roman Senate was to resist change on a federal level to any bureaucracy. We have ways of offsetting this, which is the House legislatively and actually the executive branch. But the thing is, many of the federal works that have been in place for so long, as we've seen, really specifically with stimulus aid and things that people need right now, have become bulwarks like they were in those old Roman times, where they just, no, it's not what my party wants, so it's not getting through, and such and such. I mean, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, but Frank, you're forgetting that a lot of the founders were heavily influenced by Rome. I mean, they actually intended it to change slowly. There's a reason why passing a constitutional amendment is so hard.
I know.
I think the founders gave birth to freedom, but it's up to us to keep it alive. And that, while I have issues with the Electoral College, I don't necessarily know of a better way. And the original compact, if we go back to that, is that
Hey, Jesse.
we will stick
Jesse and Carolyn.
the economy together in a nation, but each state will get a vote in determining who the leader of the country is.
Mm.
So the question is, in that regard, is the leader the president of the United States, or the president of all the people. That's president is the only office that is subject to the Electoral College. All others are popular vote. All others.
It wasn't that way originally. I mean, the president wasn't even popularly elected. Neither were senators weren't popularly elected. He is the president of the United States, not.
You're right. They were appointed. Some were appointed.
Well, of course, and if you want to talk founding fathers, they basically originally wanted to make Washington effectively king, and he said, "No, I don't want that," and so that's why I'm going to step down after 2 terms, and you need to vote for somebody else.
I don't think that was the prevailing sentiment. I think some expressed that, but I don't think that was the prevailing sentiment that Washington be king.
Yeah, that was like John Hancock and some of the real traditionalists.
So
that actually that's a good segue for another question that was raised in the chat. Will Trump continue to be influential in American politics and society after he is no longer president?
yes.
Will nationalism, xenophobia, and racism continue to grow? Those are kind of 2 different questions.
They're 2 very different questions, and I'm going to say no, because hopefully he will be in prison, although I expect he will in fact resign and let Pence be president for a day and pardon him. But the second one is the machinery which put Trump into that position, that's still all going to be there, right? And the division amongst the American people is still all going to be there. So in that sense, radical, if you'll pardon the kind of the oxymoron, but radical conservatism is still there, and it's not going to go away just because he does. Just like radical liberalism isn't going to go away anytime soon either. It's who we are.
I have an interesting philosophy here, but I have a theory. Under most election systems, whether it's popular vote or electoral college, either one, I think each party will be in power roughly 50% of the time. I looked this up on Wikipedia, but the presidency, it's very close to being like Republican 50% of the time and Democratic 50% of the time.
You mean Democrat, Federalist, Republican, as they were?
Yeah, Federalists used to exist, but yeah, in the recent past, where it's just Democrat and Republican, it's very close to 50-50. And the thing is, whatever kind of election rules you have, if one party starts not winning 50% of the time, they will adjust their value to the point where it becomes about 50%. So, for example, Republicans, actually, like some of our old, slavery used to exist, and that's gone away. Civil rights, we used to, have all those things, segregation, that went away. If it didn't go away, if one of the 2 parties kept that, then they wouldn't have been able to maintain a 50% win percentage. So they had to drop that from their sort of set of values. And so over time, if you have a 2-party system, it approaches 50-50 kind of under most reasonable elections.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact,
Right,
Lincoln Lincoln, I think he was a Republican, wasn't he?
He was the
Yeah.
first Republican.
Right. So yeah.
First
So
Republican president.
right.
Yes.
So
Okay. Yes.
the parties. I mean, that seems to confirm your hypothesis that the parties do change substantially, and part of that might be the whole bipartisan system, because they do have to
You-
cover about
Bruno,
50%.
you probably don't remember something called Southern Democrats, but in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they gave us people like George Wallace,
Many
who
people
was
in
a
Alabama have
Democrat,
never
but
forgotten
would,
that George Wallace was a Democrat.
yep, yep, and today he would be considered a radical conservative, but in those days the Democratic Party was quite a bit different, right? Lyndon Johnson, who was an interesting, very interesting fellow because he was both kind of right, left, and center all at the same time. So Johnson was an interesting president in that sense.
Right, but this is one of the things with a binary system. We don't officially have a binary system, but the nature of a binary system is that the two oppositions will essentially remain in opposition. So they'll basically find whatever one side picks, the other side will naturally be in opposition for it.
They'll
And it doesn't matter what
manufacture
the
a
issue is.
false dichotomy. So,
And you know why that happens? It's because all the freaking lawyers who are in politics and that we have an adversarial legal system. And those two things combined is how you get this binary political party, because that's how they're trained. That's how they think ever since they're late undergraduates.
As a side note,
Hmm.
I live in an area in North Carolina that used to be part of the proposed state of Franklin. At the time, well, I live just east of there, but at any rate, at the time to become a state, which I can't remember, sometime in the early 1800s, you had to send a copy of your constitution to the Congress, and they had to approve it and all that. In the Constitution of the state of Franklin, you were prohibited from holding any kind of public office if you were a lawyer or a member of the clergy.
Lawyer, a member of the clergy. What's the
boy.
similarity there? Like, why those two?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's kind of
I
a
just
weird one.
picked that factoid out of a whole basket, and it was the only one that entertained me. You know?
That is a funny one.
see, I
No,
hate to say it, but I actually like the legislative process and the law. I like it because it reminds me of a logic. It reminds me of an abstract system being consistent and based off a few assumptions, just trying to follow it through and see if it can actually be enforceable or practical as it follows through. But the lawyers, as they're opposing one another, I usually like to think of them almost as like mathematicians. And I look and I go like,
Fuck.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
No way, Jose.
I am so sorry. But it feels like that. It feels
I
like
think you're a little bit off there. I think
no. It's two logicians, and they're basically going, how can I break this logician system?
No, they're not, Frank, they're not logicians, they're poker players, and they're being driven by how they're being, how big
That's
external.
external or internal motivation. It can be either or. Motivation doesn't matter. What matters is
Motivation always matters.
not in the case of in logic. Yeah, but no.
There's a lot of different kinds of logic, my friend.
Yes, there is, but
It's
Not
kind of
only
both.
for Aristotle.
Kind of
a
both,
lot
because you have logic, but you
in
also have
telepathy.
passion and
I mean, there can be the
Bluffing.
stuff they do that we always see them do with, trial by jury that we always see in the movies, where it's a rhetorical stance and you try to convince another people without actually being rigorous or anything for a lawyer. But when we're just talking about one lawyer, let's say a lawyer who knows his shit, has studied law, and another lawyer who knows their shit and studied law, and both of them, we're just assuming here, have a sound understanding of the law, of the rules written down, coming into the game of the system. And the thing is, one has to fool the other, or one has to convince the other that what they're going at is wrong, or is some other thing than what they're going to. That is wholly logical. That is
That's a
mathematical to
beautiful
a T.
idealized model that is not actually
I know
instantiated
it's
in
not.
any form of reality.
I know it's not, but what you have to remember is political science is forefather is jurisprudence, which is political philosophy. where that type of thinking was absolutely, read Plato's Republic, read Hobbes' Leviathan, was absolutely kind of seen as the way to use logic to formulate, you know, these big abstract systems that could be governments or legislative governments.
And it'd be wonderful if that had ever been implemented anywhere, but
Oh, it has.
I don't-
Hobbes' Leviathan is the most influential piece of literature, probably not most, but it's up there. It's in the top
well,
10.
wait, but there's your brother, there's your buddy Machiavelli with his
Hobbes'
influential
Leviathan is
literature
higher.
as
I
well.
love Machiavelli, but Hobbes is above him. Not
Okay,
even.
I have a big philosophical question here.
Go ahead.
What if it's just in human nature to have binary opposition? And in
I don't.
That's a
essence, any,
fallacy.
I don't think it is actually. I mean, yes, to some extent, but there are many political systems that are not binary. That's the problem with that.
but they're dominated by, most parliamentary systems are dominated by two parties.
Most is not at all.
No, I don't think so. Not in the same way.
And human nature is a fallacy.
I'm part of the angry middle.
You know,
I would argue that we just don't talk about the things that we all agree on. So like we all want clean water. Well, I guess you could argue like Flint, Michigan, and blah blah blah. But I would argue like in general, the things that we all agree on, we tend not to talk about. So it kind of looks more divided than it really is.
Well,
Well, but let's mention something like, say, the climate.
We disagree on that, right?
Yeah, we would like
Yeah.
to not be burned off the planet, but so maybe we should talk about that.
well, the thing when you have, I feel a lot of these arguments, why they come about is because, you know, they're mass bad faith arguments. They're people who are arguing against you and everybody's taking a stance, but no one's willing to give up their stance or give up their ground. They're rooted entirely in dogmatic bias. And usually the way you forgo this is you look at the other party and say, okay, tell me what, it doesn't actually have to be a thing. Just tell me a conceivable sufficient where you would be willing to change your stance. What would I need to present you? And I can do the same for mine. It doesn't actually have to be a thing. Just come up with a conceivable. What would be a reasonable thing for you to change your stance? And if you can come up with that, I'll start working towards it. That's external motivation.
I understand what you're saying, Frank.
Yeah.
I
know.
understand that.
Yeah.
I think that one of the problems that keeps rearing its ugly head, that's a cliche, I know, but
It's fine.
is creating laws is really less than 50% of the struggle.
Mm.
In my opinion, you know, for example, we passed the civil rights law, but racism didn't go away. It still exists. It doesn't change until you change the consciousness of the people, of the citizens. So the persuasive effort doesn't end with creating a new law. You persuaded the legislators, but you haven't persuaded the populace. So
It's still a good step forward. It doesn't get you all the way there, but it helps a lot, right?
it is. I'm not saying we don't need laws. We absolutely do.
Oh, yes.
They're a catalyst. They're in my view, the work's not done when the law is made.
But are laws leading culture, or is culture leading laws?
Well, it has to be a little bit of both, because at some point you have to persuade, enough legislators have to be persuaded to pass a law. Now, whether they're persuaded for the right reasons, I don't know. I'm not making that claim, but many times people have done the right thing for the wrong reasons. I'll give you an example. Social Security. I think it's a good thing. Roosevelt was having difficulty getting enough votes in Congress to pass Social Security. There was an influential senator in North Carolina who was opposed to it. And he had a block of votes. I don't know if it was a solid block or an amorphous block, but he had people that in the Congress that he influenced. And Roosevelt invited him in for a meeting and said, "What can I do to get you on board?" And he says, "Well, I understand you're building this Blue Ridge Parkway thing, and it doesn't go through North Carolina. So I might be persuaded to give you my vote on Social Security if you could reroute this Blue Ridge Parkway through parts of North Carolina." And they did. So in that case, the right thing was done, but for the wrong reason, if you ask me.
Right, but that's just horse trading that's happened since the early Athenian democracy. There was all sorts of, even without democracy, there's been lots of horse trading, and like the Chinese dynamic.
I'm not saying any different, but we're suffering under an illusion if we believe that the right thing is done for the right reasons.
Oh no,
all the time.
I absolutely do not. And he's below me. Craig pointed out a little bit before. I am Machiavellian, Hobbesian to the core, so don't worry about that thinking from me. But I do love my logic, and I will try to bring it in when I can. And I do think lawyers get a bad rap. They're assholes, but there's something there. There's something there that I
They
like.
weren't born assholes. They were kind of raised that way or trained
Well,
that way.
Allison is not here, so we can talk shit about lawyers today.
Allison gets a buy in my view. But
She's a nice lawyer.
She's mostly a thinker, and
That's what she wants you to think.
90%
Could
of the
be.
lawyers give the other 10% a bad name.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly true. So Shakespeare should have said, "Well,
Okay,
so
Allison is in that
90% of the
10%.
lawyers."
If Allison is listening to this, she's in that 10%. Let's say that.
Okay, but how are we defining right and wrong, though? If we're talking about laws being not the leading edge, but the trailing edge, that would argue that you pass a law because it's right, because most of culture is already ahead of this. Let's say like same-sex marriage. I mean,
Yeah.
was culture of the law, and then the law finally came about? A lot of people would argue civil rights was that most of society moved on, and in that case, civil rights was a trailing edge.
I would say the law is the pragmatic or enforceable right or wrong. It's an apparition. It's meant to represent these things, but it isn't actually the right or wrong. As to if it comes first or after or anything, that's a chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
So,
That is pretty much I can show you historical instances of it coming before and being enforced upon people that didn't want it. I can show you instances of it coming afterwards after people rose up from activism. Both of them exist.
Well, it's possible. Were you done, Frank, or not?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go
I
ahead.
did-
Go ahead. I don't.
No. I need to grab another beer, so please.
Okay. What beer are you having? I'm having some Moon Man. We're talking about Wisconsin before. It's the
I'm having some fancy, hipster beer.
This is like, it's like
Fermented
being at the
grape
coffee shop.
I need to get another.
What are you having, David?
Fermented grape juice.
Fermented grape juice plus, like they say in the original Planet of the Apes. Awesome. That's the best grape juice. I forgot what I was gonna say. Sorry.
What are you having, Craig?
honey, baby, it's all honey.
Honey?
Viking blood.
Mead.
Yep. Frank will understand.
Some good
I'm not
old
supposed
mead.
to. I'm not supposed to. Yep, I'm not supposed to drink at all. But for the
I had
holiday,
to get rid of
I,
some of this grape juice. I'll be back.
All right. We won't tell the missus, Craig, unless
oh, it's
you
not
want
that'd be the doctor, not the missus. But
the doctor. Okay.
yeah.
You're not drinking sugar, are you?
Well, I would say that Viking blood mead does
Oh,
in
no.
fact contain sugar in it. Yes,
Well, damn,
along with
sir.
other distillates.
But it had to start with sugar.
Exactly.
It wouldn't get the alcohol without the sugar.
Yep.
Shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. Like, what were we
Oh,
talking
man.
about?
Talking
I was
about
gonna say
booze and see what it does.
Maybe we should switch the topic to alcohol.
No.
We can talk about alcohol now, but look, I didn't mean to dismiss what you're saying, Sashir, like the binary nature of thing. I think that we do have a lot of systems that are not bipartisan, that do not have just two political systems, parties. But it is true that there is something to the binary nature of people, and I do not fully understand how that works, but it seems clear that there is some sort of tribalism going on at the moment. Like right and left right now, politically, socially, culturally, I mean, it's largely a construct. Like you listen to people talk, and it's clear that they are somewhat indoctrinated, and it's clear that they are not really listening to reason most of the time. They're just trying to score a point, right? They're trying to win over the other side. So there's definitely a binary nature to those disagreements, and in that sort of situation, I mean, it's not really possible to do what David was saying. Like, let's try to come up with something that is reasonable for both, because that's beyond the point. The point is to beat the other side, to score a point, to show that the other side is stupid.
Yeah, that's democracy.
Yeah, when
No, that's America. That's
No,
not democracy.
good sir. You look back to Athens in the founding and
No.
debate that were part of what was going on at the time. A huge part of the things that Socrates hated in the culture that would come about at that area was a debate versus a dialectic take. A dialectic being an area where we're trying to converge on the idea of what is true, versus the founders of democracy often had these debates where it's pretty much, I say the most clever thing and mic drop, I win. Look at Zeno versus, God damn, I can't remember. Democrates? But I think it was Zeno versus Democrates. It was about atoms and what was in the middle, in between atoms. But that was one of the things that...
You know what would be cool? Frank, you're making me think about this thing. I was having this idea. We should get together. This is super nerdy, but I think it would be cool to do basically read a Plato dialogue and read the lines in the dialogue.
Oh.
Like basic. I think that would be pretty cool. I mean,
Am I reading the
I did that in high school.
Symposium or Fetus out loud?
Dress up in robes.
I think it would be cool to do
and the
like a
whole thing.
Plato reenactment on YouTube. I think that would be cool.
I did it in
Okay.
high school too, but I haven't done it since.
Yeah.
And high school was a long time ago.
Which one did you do?
I don't even know.
Oh shit.
I
I'd,
didn't know it's been that long.
I'd still want to be Diogenes and come in and like flash my lantern on all of you.
Looking for an honest man.
Looking for one honest man.
You're
Yep.
gonna have to be Socrates, Craig, because you look like Socrates.
No, baby Socrates should be Socrates. I'll be
Baby
Diogenes.
Socrates.
Oh dear.
Greg, I think you need to sleep in a culvert if you're going to be Diogenes.
Yeah.
I've come close on occasion. Not
know.
recently, thank
I think
you.
I did. Phaedrus was the one we read in high school.
I'm surprised you guys. I'm surprised you guys read that out loud. There's a couple points in there where Socrates gets quite descriptive
Now,
about certain
I didn't do
things.
that loud.
Oh, the love one? Yeah.
Yeah. I read
That,
I read
did
that at work, and I remember reading it. And there's this part.
Apologia? I don't know.
Phaedrus is the one where Socrates is talking specifically about love, and there's this one part in it where he gets really descriptive about his release and his plumage of and I just remember reading it at work and all of a sudden looking up and saying, I'm reading this in my goddamn break room. Come on, Socrates. What the hell, man?
Yeah, we had a pretty radical teacher.
There are
Okay.
people who read
This was in
James
Texas,
Joyce
on
in their
top of
break
that.
rooms. So
I mean, compare, yeah. Like the stuff that kids are exposed to today, I mean,
Lost Jesse.
it's very different from what they used to be. Like, imagine being a kid growing up today and, you know, you have access to the internet and all the things that are in the internet. I mean, kids are going to grow up a little bit messed up, I think.
I think they'll be fine.
They'll be
I
fine, you
mean,
think?
that's so cliche. You know, our parents
know,
said
but
that
it's-
about us, and the parents said before
I know
that.
it's cliche, but just think about it. Just think
yeah,
about
it's those
what
damn
kids-
hippies with their sex
I
and
am
drugs and
thinking
rock and
about it.
roll.
I'm looking at an observation of a pattern that's happened from history to history to history and deriving a general or probable truth. I'm applying completely critical thinking to it. And the general truth is, get the fuck over it. It happens every single damn generation.
It does.
You mean
Yeah.
okay? Like I'm
Recently,
like would this like
you
would
know-
I be part of the generation affected? You think, or like even are you talking about even younger than me?
I mean, every
I'm talking
generation.
about kids that grow up with stuff like you porn, you know,
Hmm.
among other things.
Stuff
Yeah.
like what?
You
Like
porn?
porn.
Unicorns?
Yes,
we
unicorn.
talked about unicorns when I was a kid.
Let's say so, yeah.
I mean,
What
I
is the
turned out.
question that we're currently talking about? So kids that grow up with that, what? Like if
Well, it's not just like I'm giving an example. Like the internet.
Bruno's going into dad mode.
Well, you can find anything on the internet. Like you can find like some really bad stuff. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
there's no real like filter. You know, like
There is a parental lock.
Yeah, that's true.
there's a,
Hold on, Bruno. Can you give me the URL for this really bad stuff? I need to do some research.
no, but what's just a general thought? Like
I'll text you, Sashir.
yeah.
Oh, hold on a second. I've got another window open here.
For the love of God,
Can I
share,
share my
close yours.
screen?
I don't want to look in your eyes when this happens.
Hold on,
No,
I gotta share
I
my
think you wanted to
screen.
get the Philo Hub, not the other one there, Sashir, but
Look, Sashir, if you Google stuff, it will appear on YouTube.
Google stuff.
Not on YouTube.
Go into
but on
Google and
Google.
type stuff.
You Google stuff. You Google whatever you can imagine, and you'll get it.
No, I think
And that's the problem that I'm talking
Wait a
about.
minute. I gotta use Tor for this. Is this one of these dark web things that I have to use Tor for?
No, I mean it's usually just Google it. Just Google it and see what happens.
I mean,
don't share your screen before you do that.
And just
Don't share your-
remember
All
to
right, are we
enable
sharing
private
screens?
browsing
Hold on.
first.
for the love of God, clear your browser history.
There was
Wait a
a-
minute. What? Offs? What is this here?
I don't know.
But yes, sure. Going back to the not the more reasonable conversation. Yeah, there is somewhat of a tribalism to us, and a binary nature to us. Yeah, I don't know if that needs to be reflected in a bipartisan system. Probably not, but it might be accentuated by a bipartisan system. This idea that you either have to belong to one tribe or to the other. And yeah, I mean, that might be a real problem with having just two options, and because people, instead of looking at options, instead of looking at different arguments and the value of arguments and positions, they start thinking about team A and team B. So team A or team B, like they want their team to win, right?
They create a dichotomy, and through the rule of excluded middles, they forgo the rational.
There's no middle because you only have
Yep.
team A and team B.
So basically, what we're
And it's
this
like
tribalism.
it's tribal. It becomes like a soccer match or a football match or a basketball match, and
Mhm.
like it doesn't matter like what your team does, right? You're always gonna argue in favor of your team. Like if it's a foul, if your teammate committed a foul, you're gonna say to the referee most likely that no, he didn't commit a foul. It wasn't a foul, right? I mean, even if you're a supporter of a team, you're always like gonna cheer in favor of your team. You're always gonna say that your team, like you're always gonna blame the referee if he
Greg has horns.
yeah, if exactly, like
Here's
Vikings or
my
Packers, I don't know.
So,
But here's the
Yeah.
but to that. There's a but to that, which is that there's people at the margin that are thinking about potentially switching teams. And so there's Democrats that are thinking about switching Republican, and there are Republicans that are right in the middle thinking about switching Democrats. So both sides have to be very careful to keep those people, because if they lose those people, that could be the election. So
You know, the funny thing is that the independents have been growing.
Mm.
yeah.
And the independents are bigger than either the Republicans or the Democrats. And so what you say is true, but there's a lot of people who are not impressed, and they're afraid that if they say, "Oh, I'm a Democrat," then they get all of the baggage that comes with the extremist in that.
Exactly, that's like me. You know, I don't want
And
all
the
that.
same
baggage.
thing with the Republicans.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
same thing with the Republicans. Yeah, you're
Okay.
right.
So you
Go
can't
ahead,
make
Greg.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
no, I want to point out this is why a reason why sports metaphors for life suck and should not be adopted by anybody. So don't go that way, Bruno. You'll be doing yourself and your child a great big favor if you don't go that way.
What
The
about
other-
Hollywood sports movies? You're just
Fuck Hollywood
dismissing a
sports
whole
movies.
genre.
Hey there, Shashir. What
Well,
hat you wearing
I
there?
think what you're
Um,
saying, Craig, is
Yeah.
we want people to put more thought into who they support politically than they do their favorite sports team.
Exactly. And when you talk about independence being a growing segment of course, the largest voters segment in the United States population is I didn't. And so there's your very large independent party, because it's the people who feel disenfranchised by both ends. And so their response to it is to not vote at all, because they're being straitjacketed into a two-party voting system.
Well,
So,
we had a really good turnout this time around.
mm,
Comparatively.
There's
I-
erosion in what you say. It's not gone, but there's some erosion in what you say.
Hmm.
My dad, one time, he asked me what the difference was between ignorance and apathy, and I said, I don't know, and I don't care.
So the thing I would get at with this is whereas you want people to be able to authentically represent the party that they vote for. A good example of this is I ran into my cousin who came back from Afghanistan and finally got to talking to him. And, you know, he's a libertarian. And, you know, I am on the opposite end of the political spectrum. And I just looked at him and I said, you know what? Why are you a libertarian? Tell me, I want you to convince me of your libertarianness. Not that you're going to change my view. I want you to convince me of why you are a libertarian. Make it sound for you and practical. And he did. He actually made it completely sound and practical from his point. And at that point, I said, okay, I'm not going to say anything more to you. No, you're good. You know, the whole point wasn't to change a view. It was to say, are you thinking as a rational person and acting as a rational person in a voting system? Because I think that's the only way a liberal system has any chance of working. Or
I like what you did there, Frank. You asked him to defend his position as best he could,
Mhm.
and too often in political discourse and philosophical discourse, we make our arguments against the worst arguments for the other
Yeah.
side. When what we need to do is we need to make our arguments work against the best arguments from the other
Steel
side.
man, the
Yeah.
other area, give them the best possible chance. And
Yeah, so this is random, but one person I noticed that does this, I don't know if you guys watch Ben Shapiro, but he attacks the worst left arguments. So whenever you attack the worst arguments from the other side,
That's known as straw
like-
manning. That's where you false
Yeah.
equivalence to knock it down to act like you took down the whole thing. That has a name to it.
yeah, straw manning.
And seal manning, as it's called, is the exact opposite. You're giving them, you're stepping in, you're going like, I'm going to give you the best possible scenario you can have, and then I'm going to knock it down afterwards. But yeah,
Yeah, or that's the false dichotomy too. Yeah,
yeah, you don't necessarily have to.
yeah.
Well, and another thing that I think I try to do, and I'm not always successful, is that I try to condense something into an elevator speech.
Hmm.
You know, if I only have 2 minutes to say what I think, what do I pull out of my quiver? Is it ready to go? And that's one of the things I try to do.
The problem with that is that ends up just being messaging. That's part of the argument that we have too many. We just have too much sound bite instead of nuanced arguments.
Not a soundbite, because in my view, sometimes you should not. I don't try to change somebody's mind in one sitting or in one conversation. What I try to do is plant a seed that gets them to think for themselves, to give their minds something to gnaw on. More minds are changed by gnawing than by hearing anyway. You know this.
Yeah, but that's not exactly politics. I mean, the art of rhetoric would be I'm planting a seed to convince you to agree with me.
Well,
In terms of
rhetoric.
messaging.
That was the whole thing that I was bringing up with legislation. I feel like rhetoric plays such a large role in politics. We then say rhetoric is politics, and then I would step in, and that's where I came with legislating. I'm like, no, there is a logical aspect to this. There is one that we can actually break down and has roots, historical roots that I can show you. You know, but the act of convincing somebody, rhetoric is tempting. The ways to do it as an orator or rhetoric is tempting, and it's not always bad. Sometimes you have to appeal to a person's emotional side to get them.
That's true.
The idea, though, is, and I'm going to use the word ought. Yeah, you ought to somewhere
It is.
ground
Wait a minute,
it.
is it 20-20? Is that what you're saying?
No, ought, just as in should, ought, in any way when it gets used. Yeah. Anywho,
All right, guys, are we ready to change the subject? And
Oh, sure.
yeah, go ahead.
I know. I keep on getting messages from. There's something going on in Discord. I don't know what it is. It's all crazy.
should we talk about the stuff? So the stuff that people were actually talking about in the chat this week was, so I formulated a question here, like condensing what they were talking about. What can we do to prevent the insidious effects of social media and the violations of individual rights by tech companies, governments, and other organizations?
You can live as a hermit.
Social media.
And then there's a second question, but let's start with that. Well,
We're kind of
actually,
already gearing it towards-
let me do question 2 because it's related. Are the technological innovations such as social media and widespread data collection put democracy at risk? So basically, what should we do about this all these technological problems? I think it would be interesting to talk about these problems a little bit. There's a lot to talk about.
A little bit. So there's the free speech slash censorship issue.
Mhm.
There's the people getting addicted to social media issue, and then there's sort of the algorithms reinforcing what you want to see issue. I think it might be good if we focused it on one of those.
Okay.
two or
You choose,
some other.
Michael. You choose.
Too
Come on, let's.
open-ended for me. Okay, so we could start with the censorship one, or censorship slash are they doing the right thing?
Fine. Sounds good.
So in my view, that's a tricky one. I tend to like a lot of the tech CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey. I don't think they're doing a terrible job of dealing with deciding what to allow and what not to. Now, that doesn't mean there couldn't come along another tech CEO that would do a poor job of it. But yeah, I don't have any really super strong views either way.
I am indifferent.
I do.
Go.
What
Fire.
do you think?
Let it rip.
Part of trying to figure out what to do about a problem is understanding how big it is. And two things. In China, right now, there is a bank, a national bank. It's just like Bank of America here or something, you know. It's huge. They have made an app that works on a smartphone. And you can apply for a loan on that app. And that's great. But the problem is the app gets access to APIs to understand what you're doing with your phone. And even though this is not causation, they have been able, because of big data, to determine a correlation between how often a person charges their phone and how regularly they will pay on their loan.
So just to clarify, that's an issue about privacy rather than censorship. So we can go with privacy.
That's number one.
Okay.
That's one example. And,
Okay.
and that's not in this country, but it's something that we need to be aware of, to watch out for, I think. Because I don't think any of us want decisions being made that way. Maybe some of us do, but I don't. The other thing is I have telephone conversations with my brother, and he's in another city, and every once in a while we connect, and we did an experiment one night. We went, he was on his phone, I was on mine. We went to our computers, and I said, go to google.com. Don't use the address bar doubling as a search bar. Go actually to the site google.com. And you know, when you start to enter a text, you'll get a list of suggestions that complete the thought or that complete the question.
Let me guess before you say the next thing. So it was different for both of you, right? It was very different.
It was. And he didn't think it was a big deal. And it's not. If I'm looking for new candlesticks,
Well,
or
objection.
something like that,
Objection. He's leading.
I don't care. But if I'm looking up a political question, do I want to remain in that silo?
Well, they're leading you.
Asking Google to keep me in that silo or not?
So I think there's two issues you brought up there. So the first issue is privacy. The second one is somewhat privacy, but also the idea that you're fed the information, you're fed the same information over and over. You're not able to see things that you might, I'm sorry, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson spoke about this. He said, what if I want to bump into something that I wouldn't normally have bumped into? And so when it already fills in your ideas based on your history, it's preventing you from bumping into something that maybe you don't usually bump into. You know what I mean? So I think those are two separate, maybe related issues. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, I was going to say that what's happening in China and the PRC is actually much more insidious than that. And even I saw this thing about Shenzhen, which is apparently the most wired city in the world now. And everybody in China, their version of Facebook, which is basically Facebook, Twitter, like their dominant is called WeChat or Weibo. But you can also run your account. There's like a WePay. And so I was hearing people saying that because they've got so much facial recognition, that somebody was jaywalking one time, and next day he noticed that his WeChat account had been deducted the amount of a fine for
Wow.
jaywalking because they actually tied in that.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, no, it's beyond. It is quite a.
Well, if that's the way the world is going to be, we need to see that coming.
I mean,
The sooner we see that coming, the better.
if you want to get really, really vague with our equivalences, in California, they already do toll booths where it pretty much just tracks your, they have cameras up that just pretty much take
Your license plate.
Yep, of your license plate. They won't tell you if you're on a toll road or anything. You're expected to go online. You're expected to find the route you took, and you're expected to pay it. They won't tell you if you're on it or, if they're going to fine you or anything. You'll just all of a sudden receive something in the mail that says, hey, guess what? You didn't pay this. Your ass is goddamn
They do
grass.
that in Florida too, and I believe in Minnesota they do it with the sane lanes, where if you are
haven't-
not an appropriate person going into the
Well,
shared
the sand
lanes,
lane
that
is
you are-
you purchase a like an RF thing, and if you don't have the right RF thing, they charge you. You get a ticket in the mail.
Okay. I
But
just
I'm-
remember going to California when I drove there to live out there.
Yeah,
I
so
actually had a
seeing-
friend who was out there who looked at me and said, hey, what route did you take to get in here? And I told him my
Seeing it
route. And he's like,
coming
hey, you
is
got to
not
go
the problem
online and pay
anymore.
this.
right?
Otherwise,
It's
I would have
already
no
here.
idea. Yeah, that's kind of what
What
I'm
to
saying.
do about it is the problem now.
Right, but this is something I've been saying for a while. I think most of you have heard me say this, is we live in a Huxley world. I mean, Aldous Huxley saw this back in the 1920s, that we would trade, essentially we'd be willing to, I mean, this is not an Orwellian world. It's not governments come in and impose this stuff. We've just voluntarily agreed to trade things like privacy for convenience.
Oh,
Or for
forget
entertainment,
Huxley.
for both.
We can go straight up dead Kennedys. It's giving me convenience or giving me death. Look at what's going on with the pandemic.
Somebody printed out the user agreement for Candy Crush,
Yep.
Mm.
and it was 23 fucking pages.
Yep.
Well,
Angry
that
Birds.
is actually sort of what I was going to point it out, David.
Yeah.
Regarding what you're talking about, Sashir. It's because, I mean, I mean, it's kind of like, it's not really true that we're volunteering stuff, like, yes, we're volunteering stuff, but if they give you like a 23-page agreement, like to play Candy Crush, are you really gonna read that? I mean, who are we?
Well, no,
kidding?
that's
That's not
convenient.
The
volunteering.
question is
not
not whether or
It's
not you're going to
convenience.
read it, but what are you agreeing to?
Exactly. You don't know what you agree to. They know that you don't know what you're agreeing to. That's the
And why
whole
do we
thing, the
have
way-
23-page terms of service agreements?
Yeah.
Because we have a litigious society, and we have an
Ah.
adversarial legal system, and we have lawyers writing terms of service. And
Buddy,
so,
that happens
yeah, they
anytime
wind up
you
with
have a
23
complex
pages long.
system of logic. Just look at Kant or the things that happen with Hegel. Anytime you try to have a complex system, it gets ridiculous.
That's right, David. It's okay.
Well, there's a tendency to entropy, basically. That's all.
Hmm.
But no, we don't read it because it's
I mean, we
inconvenient.
don't agree to it. We don't agree to. I mean, we agree to it in
We
a
agreed
very,
to
like,
it.
abstract way. I mean,
One of
You
my,
agreed to it.
my friends
You
was
clicked
trying
okay,
to
bro.
encourage me
Right,
to
yeah.
sign up. One of my friends was trying to encourage me to sign up with this group called Ebates. I don't know a whole lot about them,
Mhm.
but because I am often in arguments with this friend, and he's a good friend, I decided I would read what did you call it, Craig? You had a better
Terms of
phrase.
service, TOS.
Terms of
is
service.
What we
I,
call
I
them.
read their agreement. And although it was in different places, in one place it said clearly, we can change this service agreement anytime we want.
wow.
In
Yep.
another place, it said, if we change the service agreement and you continue to use the service, by doing that, you are agreeing to it. And And in another place, it said we can change this agreement anytime we want, and we don't have to tell you. What?
That
That's
doesn't sound legal.
ridiculous.
Eh.
But
That's
and it
probably
would-
something that applies to a lot of them.
to be
Pretty
fair,
much all of them
it
until
would
they're
not
tried in
hold
court.
up in a court of law.
Well, there has been a lawsuit saying they do have to tell you when they change.
Yeah.
That's actually now they have to say when they change it. There was a case like 2 years ago that determined that was.
But if no one's ever reading, and you know, this happens with every Apple's iTunes update, whatever. If no one's ever reading it, and the way the law works is it is the job of the signee to know what they are agreeing to. And that is just fundamental how the law goes down to. Now, you can still argue that if the contract that they are, you know, having you sign encroaches upon your basic constitutional rights, you can still always argue against the fucking contract. But
Which has happened.
yes,
against
it has
companies
happened.
as big as Google.
Yep.
So what do you
Google
think about-
lost a case where people had agreed to a contract, and the judge says this is ridiculous, and threw it out.
Yes.
Well, there are laws about transparency in contract and using plain language.
Yeah.
So you couldn't like write your contract in Latin.
Yeah, that's the thing. Plain language is ambiguous. Anything that's ambiguous, logic in a contract is worthless. It's
Yeah.
it
It's
doesn't.
not
Second order logic. That's what you need.
Never sue
if you
anybody that has more money than you do.
So what do you guys think about a law like this? And I think laws like this might actually exist in other countries, but whenever you sign a contract, and as part of that contract, the company is using your data, they have to give you an option where you can opt out for them to not use your data, and it has to be easy for you to do that. Like not where you have to call up a number, but like simply click this, and then they don't use your data. So it gives you the option. But like, for example, I realized this with YouTube. So with YouTube, you can either opt in or opt out. If you if you tell them you can use my data, then they use it in their algorithms, and all your suggestions are based on your past history. If you opt out, then they don't use your history, and they just give you generic recommended videos. So you have that choice. What do you think about a law where they would be required to easily give you that choice?
I'd be all for it.
Yeah, that would be good.
Same here.
Like
That's kind of where the European Union has
Right,
headed,
yeah.
the
and
whole problem
it's
though with
actually
YouTube, though,
forced American companies to follow it because they do business in Europe, and so we got to follow their laws. And rather than having different sets of rules in different regions, the U.S. companies are actually slowly but surely adopting the European regulations.
the
Plus,
problem though, specifically with YouTube though, is YouTube is owned by who? It's owned by Google, and Google happens to be probably the biggest freaking offender of this data usage area.
What's owned by Alphabet, actually.
Oh, is it?
I'm
Oh,
glad
I'm
you-
sorry.
That's
is the
company.
parent
The
company
parent
of all
company
this
is called
stuff.
I'm glad
Alphabet.
Never
you-
mind. Disregard what I said. I'm wrong.
I'm glad you,
Alphabet's the biggest offender.
Alphabet
I'm
is
glad you
Oh.
mentioned
Just
that, though.
step back one more level.
Okay.
We often hear stories about how China is stealing intellectual property. But Google is scanning and copying entire books in China without paying the authors anything. That's wrong.
Does
Well, they're doing
China
that
have?
here. They
Yeah.
digitized
Does
the
China
Stanford
have a
Library.
public domain, or does what's,
No,
How does it work?
the author or publisher, whoever, has the copyright,
Mhm.
and Google is copying it without compensating anyone.
Okay.
So
Well, they're exploiting
have
different
it-
countries'
we,
laws.
we have an American company stealing the intellectual property of citizens of another country.
Sort of like the
And-
British Empire
and-
did for centuries. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
That
And
is also
and we hear complaints about how China is stealing intellectual property. We're doing it too.
Bruno?
well. No,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say. I mean, I've been I watched the Snowden movie not so long ago, 2016 biopic. It's a good movie about Edward Snowden, and then I've been doing some research on all that on that whole thing, and I mean, the NSA was spying on people all over the world. It wasn't just the United States. There's that, and now the courts. I mean, this is what 10 years later. Not 10 years, but 7 years later, they're striking all of that stuff down because it is in fact illegal. I mean, he was pointing out stuff that was. I mean, this is not me saying. This is the court saying that stuff was highly illegal. And they were doing it not just to American citizens, but people all over the world. And people there weren't consenting to it, not even like with the terms of agreement. I mean, they were like turning, basically, you know, if you have a phone and if you have a camera, they could be spying on you. They could be tracking your emails. And they were, in fact, doing those things. So that's a whole other, you know, layer of to this thing, you know, is like, yes, we have the Facebooks and we have the Googles and you have the Amazons. But we also have like all over the world, all these governments that are, you know, we know that the American government is spying on us. That's like a fact. That's established. We know that. But I mean, the Russians are probably spying on us. The Chinese are probably spying on us. Who knows who's spying on us? Probably a lot of people, you know. We
Just give up.
We just don't know,
Just
but
give
they
up,
are.
bud.
Oh, I'll guarantee you that your closest allies are probably the ones who are most deeply invested in spying on you.
And then there's another curious thing, which is very similar to what you were saying, David, that goes both ways, is that there was, I was just listening to this thing or reading this. I think I was reading an article, and it's very interesting. It is, in fact, true that the Russians have intervened in American elections. They have tried to hack American elections. It's just, the interesting thing is, they've documented the number of times that the Americans, so the other side of the coin is that the United States has also intervened,
Yeah.
hacked Russian elections, disrupted.
Oh, hacking
they-
is the least of it.
They've counted, the funny thing is they've counted the number of times, and I think the Russians are.
I got a history
are
book of
definitely
South
down. They're
America
allowed-
over to left here. Hold on, I'm going to be
It's
right
like
back.
3-1 for the United States. So the United States is definitely winning in that game. You know, more money. We got more money. So it's like 3-1, but it's definitely not just one-sided. You know, and that makes you think. You know, like it's like what David was saying about Russia, about China.
I was in a symposium recently, and it was about the history of computing. And one of the topics was they were talking about IBM in Brazil in the 1970s. How IBM, basically an American company, established a puppet government in Brazil so that they could sell IBM products to them. So
Well, you don't need computers. There's a whole Chiquita banana setting up, influencing government. I'm just saying this is American exceptionalism. You know, we can do it. We can do it to you, but you can't do it to us.
Exactly,
American
which we
exceptionalism.
inherited from British exceptionalism.
Well, yeah, there was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we kind of need to look at. You know, it's not just one-sided. Yeah. I mean, that's just rhetoric, right? Oh, the Chinese are bad. I mean, the Russians are bad.
Anytime
It goes
you
both
apply
ways.
a qualitative area to, Chinese, okay, X is qualitative, bad, good, anything like that doesn't have either transitive, better than, lesser than, or you're not going to acknowledge the mode or context in which, it's going to be in comparison or in the context that I think this improperly qualify it. Yeah, it's completely meaningless. You can't.
There's an old aphorism about people living in glass houses and throwing stones, and I think we all find ourselves in that position.
JC came up with that, right?
The glass houses thing, it's old. I am not entirely sure how old. Older than I
Stacy,
am.
do you mean Jesus Christ?
I do. I was just making a very stupid joke.
I was
I
going
thought
to
it was
say in
Brian of
the
Nazareth, but
first century AD, there was actually not enough glass to build a house. So
That's also true.
I think that might have been attributed to a much later writer putting it
Until
in
Jesus made the
Jesus'
glass
mouth.
because he was a carpenter.
Jesus probably
had
didn't
them.
know what glass was.
No, they had glass. Yeah, their glass was very rare and
Did
expensive.
he know about it, you think?
Oh, he definitely knew about glass. Glass existed in Roman times. Glass certainly.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
I'm just saying, they
had
probably didn't have glass
volcanoes, so
houses.
they had glass.
I'm guessing a later writer, probably like around the 3rd century, might have attributed that to. I'm just saying, there's a lot of stuff attributed to Jesus that he probably.
Wait,
didn't
are
say.
we actually
Well, I mean,
attributing?
the Bible was
Jesus?
written. When was the Bible written? It was like 500. 500 was when, you know,
There's a lot of debate. The
Maybe- I
I
version
think the
you
earlier
know,
books.
maybe
the version of the
600,
Bible you know and that you study wasn't written until
like
well around
wasn't a
1,000
1500.
something.
formally.
No,
1100s,
la-
right?
later.
There was a
Yeah.
council of Nicaea.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's-
so our
it's-
version of the Bible really is like, I mean, it's not even close. I mean, it's like
I mean, the version I
1,000
have is one of
years
the largest, most accepted versions. It's the King James Bible.
Yeah, that's the most
You know,
popular one. What?
and-
When was that written?
King James Bible. I have it right over here. I could actually get the date.
It's like one. It's like
Hold on.
1,200 or something. Like, it's not. I mean,
It's-
yeah.
Well, well, there are several King James. I guess depends what king. If it was King James, it was probably after.
That's a whole like rabbit hole, you know. If we
Right,
start
yeah.
talking about the Bible, and
1611.
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, if it was a famous King
So-
James after the
when?
English Civil War,
1611.
that would have been
Wow, 1611.
Yeah.
That was a King James that was restored after the English Civil War. So
Yeah.
Imagine
The op-
how different
This
that
is
was
the up-to-date
from whatever Jesus
authorized
Christ-
Old Testament,
Christ
New
said.
Testament Apocrypha. So,
Imagine how different that was from what actually Jesus Christ said.
oh yeah. Yeah.
well, he probably didn't say it in English. Yes.
Well,
Well, that's-
certainly not in English, but
That's the
Or in
thing.
Latin.
And this isn't, the Bible's really a big one on this, but this goes for any literary text you read that's classical. Usually, especially when you have to do the translations over and over again, the Greeks are a big one. You realize just based off who translated it, where you're getting it from in the publisher, you can be reading almost two completely
Mhm.
different
Oh, you
pieces
are.
of work.
Mhm.
Not to mention concepts to one civilization. There's oftentimes the concepts that don't even exist in Germanic terms. English is Germanic terms and can be expressed properly. So they basically have to bastardize it in order to express it to us.
I'm sure what Jesus really said was the Tao of which you speak is not the Tao that we.
It was not lousy. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, what is the world gonna look like in 10 years from now with the whole social media thing and
I have no freaking clue.
I think that depends if we're still here 10 years from now. That's still an open.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I mean, but that's.
I
I don't,
understand.
Go ahead.
Shashir, is that your name?
Yep.
Okay, I said it right.
Yep.
Oh, good.
That's close enough. I'm not that picky. Yeah. I'm just saying humans have had a pretty good run. So
Well, I understand what you're saying, but a contemporary of Mark Twain pointed out why, when we see nothing but progress behind us, do we think the future is full of terror?
Well, it's
Yeah.
As a
because
kid-
there's,
hold on. Let me do this.
that's
First,
an
guys.
interesting one.
Hold on, no, stop. As a
I'll stop.
contemporary,
I just want to say that's an interesting one, but I want to hear
Okay.
what you have to say on the matter.
okay, as a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft, it's that which man fears the most is the unknown.
yep. I knew that was
Oh.
coming.
Yep,
there's
there's my
thing
counter.
is, there's marginal improvements to our situation, and then there's existential risk. And I feel like we make marginal improvements, but we may not settle the existential risk. So that's kind of my answer.
And the
Exactly.
part
What
of
do you
me
mean by
that-
that, Michael?
Marginal
part of me that's
improvements.
a-
We
sorry.
invent the refrigerator.
No,
we
but what
invent
do you
the
mean
light bulb.
by the whole thing, by the existential risks and all that?
Global warming, nuclear war, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. No, I agree. I definitely agree. Go ahead, Frank. You don't need to raise your
I
finger.
just like to be kind.
And was that H.L. Mencken that said that? Hey, David, was that H.L. Mencken?
I don't know.
It was
If he
after
did,
Twain.
then I arrived at it independently.
I was going to say H.L. Mencken did write some stuff. I mean, he was
Yeah.
like the New York Society columnist during the Gilded Age. So.
Yeah.
Frank has the finger up, so the nice finger, not the other.
Oh, wait,
one.
we got to figure Frank here. Hold
Well, I
on a
could,
second.
anywho, the one thing I would like to say is if any of you have ever looked at the work of people who were in futurism or who did the works from the 1800s, and you look at their work and you go, my God, how could they have thought, the ridiculous things they thought the world was going to be? I mean, every now and then you get the inspirational people who are like, oh, they were on to something. But there's so much just like steam powered, umbrellas that would carry people off and like just ridiculous things. And when we get the question, what do you think the world is going to be like in 10 years from now? The thing I usually do is I look at what the world was 10 years ago, and I look at myself at that point and I go, could I at any point have predicted the shit that was going to come about at that point? And I go, fuck no. No. It's just admitting at this point the limit of my knowledge and what it can be used to do. Me trying to bolster my pride or would just be arrogance at this point because it's ill-informed. It's incomplete data. So,
That's true, and the whole social media thing, I mean, it kind of like crapped up on us. I mean, it wasn't like something that you woke up and you said, "Whoa, social media is here." No, it just kind of like, it got in, and now the world is very different. It's very different when now it's the time when people are stopping to think about it.
So we're concerned
and
about
it's
social
getting
media, and
different
yet we are
faster
being recorded
than
on
it did
YouTube.
while we were growing up.
Wait, one at a time, because there were like 3 people speaking.
Mine's quick. I would just say if we're concerned about social media, what are we doing here being recorded on YouTube for posterity? But
Good point. Good point.
Recorded by Alphabet. I for one love Google. I love Sergey Brin. He is going to lead us to the future.
well,
Eric Schmidt, though, who was the CEO of Google for a while, was quoted as saying, "We just get right up to the creepy line. We don't go over it." Well, my creepy line is a little different from yours. What creepy line? I think recording or scanning all of the books by Chinese authors is crossing the creepy line without paying them.
Have you guys seen the Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Yeah.
here's my creepy line. It lives right next to me in my house, and you notice that the lights are on, which means the microphone is turned off
Exactly,
at
yeah.
the moment because I'm not using it.
the minute that replies to you, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Craig. You need to get out of the house. Just start running.
I've actually got a skill
And my
for
name actually is
Alexa
Dave.
that is
Oh no.
Okay, but if it starts saying Daisy Daisy to you, you know you've defeated it.
That's what it wants you to think.
Anytime now.
Yeah,
I'm
that
looking
could be the
still
game
for
theory.
also Sprach Bighorn Sheepathustra. So
Yep.
I mean, at this point, is there anything we can do at all that to change like what we saw in something like the Social Dilemma, to circumvent the problems that are posed to us by all these social media inputs
Civil.
and outputs? Is there something that we can actually do? Is that or is it, like, I don't know if the government is going to come up with these regulations. I mean, maybe
No.
they will. It seems that
It's
the
way
European
too late for that.
Union is doing it, but I don't know. Like, there's too much lobbying in the United States for governments to act. To
I
actually.
feel the government, or more specifically the judicial branch, is limited in where it can step in, that there are laws already in place that it can enforce upon contracts and things that it can see that it clearly infringes upon them. As far as individuals, you have a combination of proper consumerism and, civil disobedience. But, you also have the fact that, this is very much part, social inertia. It's already happening. That's why so many people feel powerless. It's being such an overwhelming force and already is in place that, yeah, you could rebel against it. You could, but more than likely it's going to be exhausting and you're going to see no change or little to no change.
Well, and a lot of the time you wouldn't even know how, because you would be a pariah, because we're all in this together. We're all in.
Yeah.
Like, we're all on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram
Yep.
and whatever it is. And like, if you're out now, it's like, I mean, what are you doing?
Well, that's the other thing that I feel like.
I'm not
sorry.
even speaking about the whole pandemic. Because now
Well, we could become Luddites.
But I feel like COVID has really put this in perspective for me, specifically with, in Minnesota, Walt's having to step in. I loved going to gyms, but Walt's having to step into closed gyms again because we were getting overwhelmed. And I have to be honest, when I was at the gym, over half the people there weren't wearing masks. They weren't wearing anything, any type. I was wearing it the whole time. Over half people there weren't. Is just the fact that I honestly think, I believe it fully now, people will give up not only their liberty, but their life and safety just to maintain a status quo or a conventionalism. They will.
Convenience. It's an
They will. They will.
world.
That's why I brought up Dead Kennedys. You brought up Huxley. You're down over on that side.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing is,
I looked at some pictures from the 1918 pandemic,
yeah,
and there were pictures of people in masks. People didn't take away our freedom then.
no,
why do we think they're trying to do that today?
There was an anti-mask league.
I mean, honestly, the whole
1918.
argument of the masks are taking away our freedom, I mean, it's just idiotic. Like, you're not allowed to go outside and be naked. You have to wear clothes. I mean, why?
Well, speak for yourself.
You have to wear
I
a
mean,
mask not to spread this.
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on.
I mean, why is that?
Please don't.
let's
Don't
give this
get
let's
naked.
give this
Being
argument the
30
benefit of the
degrees kind
doubt.
of keeps you from going outside being naked.
Let's give this argument the benefit of doubt, specifically with what has just happened in New York with the Supreme Court and Steele, the stance of, if it infringes upon the religious rights, can we enforce it? And this is where actually the Supreme Court, being, we all see them as having a bias or being stacked one way now, or I feel like a lot of us do. But at this point, like, I can see fully, if I was a lawyer in that case, I could fully argue at the point that, yeah, you can't close down those religious places off the Constitution you've given me. Like, I could possibly do that argument. I don't agree with that argument, but I could see how I could do it.
What you could do is, of course, erect barriers around them that all the people there who enter are going to stay there for a good long time and not go out into the public space.
Granted, there's always the red tape or something where you get under what conditions or anything like that. But given that the pursuit of happiness specifically is such an ambiguous term, and the Declaration was originally property, which wasn't so ambiguous.
That was Locke, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of problems.
But, and specifically religious freedoms become, freedom of belief becomes such an ambiguous and hard to enforce term. I look at that, I'm like, yeah, I could pretty much get away with fucking anything in this place if I had to enforce it as a lawyer, you know, because this is ill-founded.
Well, you can make up your own religion. I mean,
Yeah, well,
I think all religions are made up.
yes, but
Oh, yeah.
Frank can make his own. Yes.
I would say, hold on, I would say, I once had a person say,
Frank
that's
is-
a made-up word, and I said, all words are made up.
That's correct.
Somebody made him up at
No.
some point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do the great old ones have to say about this? Frank?
Yeah.
That's what I-
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm going to
As a thought slumbers.
I'm just going to win every Scrabble game at this point. So, yeah. No,
Well,
I mean,
the
look,
thing
you
is,
got to
you
understand the
make up-
founding of.
You make up a
country.
gibberish word, and then you go, oh, you should have clarified prior that we are playing by Webster's Dictionary 11th edition.
Look, Trump has made up a lot of new words.
Look, I'm winning Scrabble with Kofefi. Don't knock it. That's a real word. Now, Kofefi's going to be in the dictionary.
Well, that's the thing. Language is lucid, and we like to act like it's you have rigid definitions, but the thing is, you can get away. You know, I have works here from the Chicago Manual to Dreyer's English. You can get away with murder and grammar if you really want to. If you know.
Now, I'm just curious, is anybody here familiar with Steven Pinker? Raise your hand.
Yeah. Right
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
I only know the
Not
name,
familiar.
but I forgot. Is he a philosopher?
No,
Well,
he's a
He's
psychologist.
actually an evolutionary psychologist, but he wrote a lot of books, and he wrote 2 trilogies. One trilogy was about language, and the other trilogy was about the brain or the mind.
Yeah, I only know the name, but I've never read anything by him.
The third book in both trilogies was the same book.
So
Ah.
the, what are the
Non-fiction,
trilogies? The brain
the brain and language.
and language.
So, what does editor think of that? I'm wondering.
Who?
What did his editor think of that?
Oh, well, he's popular enough to where
So, I guess Random House, yeah.
his editor
I mean,
is
that makes
more
sense,
worried
right? I
about
mean-
what he thinks of it.
No, actually, no, it doesn't make sense on the basis of semiotics and discoveries in the later 20th century and Wittgenstein. Let's not forget late Wittgenstein.
We always
no,
forget
it-
Wittgenstein.
Late isn't dead. Yeah.
Yes.
no,
The
the later,
former-
specifically the works done in the Blue and Brown
Rudolf
books
Ludwig.
and philosophical investigations. And basically his proclamation that becomes almost absolute idealism that no, the word has nothing to do with the expression or anything. Language games is a term you use. We are just arguing over definitions or assumptions to refine our definitions or assumptions. There's no basis.
That sounds a lot like deconstruction,
No, it wasn't deconstruction.
but that's the-
Deconstruction was on the terms of logocentrism and understanding the words, mainly of Derrida and Michael
Foucault.
Michel Foucault. Later it came as a criticism mainly of Enlightenment tactics, which would think that we could get at the thing initially, but Wittgenstein wasn't arguing if we could get to the thing initially or not. What he was arguing is actually there is no thing. We're just firing back and forth. He's
yeah,
not,
that's deconstruction. Is that there's
no,
inherently is no
it's
meaning.
not deconstructionism. You're thinking it as, logical positivism isn't enlightenment. It's a separate area, and this was directly towards that. Deconstructionism was towards enlightenism. So you're doing a false equivalence right now.
Oh, it's a critique.
It
But at
was-
the end result is there's no meaning.
Well,
no.
okay, so why is the brain not associated with language though, Frank? You lost me.
The brain, or the expression the thought that we have, we often think that has a correlation or some attachment. My thought of tree has a correlation or attachment to a tree or something like that. We have a basis. The semiotics was I can't remember the scientist, but it was done in the later 20th century that rocked the world of psychology and everything, because we were very heavy on on word reference and other areas to figure out what people are thinking in the subconscious, was basically a basis of saying there's no correlation or causal connection between my thought of a cow, was the example, and a cow in the real world. There's nothing connecting it. Wittgenstein took this further and did an actual proof showing that no, there absolutely is no correlation between this thing. We're just redefining my thought of a cow to your thought of a cow. There is at no way getting that thing.
Of course, the value of a proof is worth only what the value of the axioms upon which it is based. So
the value of the proof is the value that is able to convince people that there is no way to decidedly go against the proof. They can conceivably go against it. The axioms that are based upon that proof are just to be on the grounds.
Frank,
that they are
I'm gonna have
consistent
to try
within
to
each
understand this without drinking 2 beers, man.
there
You're
you
gonna have to
Better
drink.
if you drink.
Buddy,
I think it's better if
They're
you
not
drink.
like, you know,
Keep
like
drinking,
stuff made
drink.
by,
Keep
you
drinking.
know,
have you
Make
have you seen how much I've been drinking?
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah,
So-
This is
Frank and I
real
can
beer.
disagree here, but
Let me just say, Frank,
we're talking about Searle. We're-
I think you're right, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that happens
David,
a lot
this is
more.
like, this is,
I
yeah,
think
that
you
is
think you're
exactly
right.
what you think when you listen to Frank. That is very good.
But you know, you guys, for I don't want to sound bad here, but you guys are smarter than the average Joe.
Well, you know, I did go to.
Oh gosh, oh
so,
golly.
yeah.
And so your challenge is not to persuade each other or to persuade me, but to persuade the masses.
No, we're having a binary dialectic right now.
And that's hard.
That's not hard. That's impossible.
Well, yeah, I have no interest in persuading the masses of anything.
It's more important, sometimes it's more important to be effective than it is to be right. Because how many conversations have you had where somebody points their pious finger at you and says, no, you're wrong?
Mhm.
And how productive are those conversations? They're not.
They're super productive. I realize a sunken cost fallacy and move on. Ergo, I did
Yeah.
exactly what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, I think often your demeanor and how you present the argument is more important than what your argument is. So, especially if you're talking to the masses or people that aren't super educated in philosophy, you know, treating them with respect, not saying, you know, not just saying, well, that's wrong. That, like, your
Yeah.
mannerisms, I feel like, matter.
You're a
Oh, yeah.
terrible person.
Hold on,
Yeah.
because I've had people shout the, you know, I, as you just saw, I can be very hard to understand when I really start digging
I
into
know.
it.
Frank was telling me I was wrong about deconstruction.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. Like, you have to know your audience. So, like,
For the record, I
friends with
explained
people-
why you were wrong of
Yeah.
deconstruction.
Yeah.
I don't know, Frank. I got you to diverge. You don't realize my tactic of tripping you up with stuff.
No, never mind. Okay.
I get you to
Anywho,
argue with yourself, Frank.
no.
The
Anywho,
judo trick.
Anywho, but the thing is, I've had people approach me with the classic Einstein quote of anybody who knows something well should be able to explain it in play terms, or should be able to explain terms that someone should get. And then the thing I would always look back at them and it's like, you know, I have 3 doctorates in my family, and all of them have taken logic classes. All of them would disagree with you. And on that term right there, I would
Einstein's actual real quote that people should be using is things should be explained as simply as possible, but no simpler.
yeah,
yeah.
that what I would actually agree with. I would say I would usually go at, and we kind of got this with lawyers when we were doing, like, you know, the terms and agreement and everything. It's when you get to explaining certain concepts, when they get abstract, where you have to abstract far enough. All of you probably remember taking calculus or statistics or some level, you know, getting high up in math of analysis. and just starting to go like, what the fuck does this have to do with the everyday world? What the hell? You know, and the point is, you don't think about it when you discuss philosophy or when you discuss political science, or you don't think about it. But a lot of times, these concepts, you'll start trying to break them down, and someone will be asking you why to explain it. And that math, that shit you want to ignore, that logic, will all of a sudden rear its ugly head and be like, yeah, you have to remember me, and you actually have to apply and explain me again. And the thing is, if the person doesn't have any concept, try explaining algebra to someone who's never taken an algebra class. Have fun with that. What do you mean?
Elevator speech.
You know,
Thought seed.
you know, it's not always so simple. It's not always something that the person has to have a willingness to want to grasp that and want to learn more. If they don't, you might as well be running your head up against the wall.
Or you have to get them interested.
Well, I can't get them interested. I can use
Well,
rhetoric.
no, you can't get everybody interested.
Well, not everyone,
But you can get some.
but
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, but I think this is kind of it's
50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Depends what that 50% is and what that 100% is.
It also depends on where, if it's digital or not. I mean, if there is a complete binary. Yeah.
Like if we were going to say 50% of dirty underwear is better than 100% of no dirty.
Well, we reached the
They're trying to
stage that
get
we're
sister
talking about
naked
dirty
outside, I can tell.
Oh, go ahead.
that we're talking about dirty underwear. So I think it's pretty good time for us to think about, end the fun. But
We're always ending on dirty laundry. Is that the key?
well, kind of.
Yeah, fine. I'm going to the Discord chat now.
Or similar concepts in any case.
Yeah, I'm curious what's going on in the Discord chat.
Yep.
But no, I think it was a good talk. We talked about politics and we talked about technology, which is very important for society and for our future. I don't know. I think we raised some really interesting points. I mean, to your point, David. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's not just about having conversations. I mean, we have to talk about these things in a way that we have to make some sort of impact in the world. And I think, this is a start, raising awareness about issues. I think, having public conversations. I think this is kind of like how society changes, with books, with podcasts, with movies, with TV, with public speakers, right? So it's all, we're like hives, we need to say things that other people will absorb, and if enough people absorb a certain concept, that's really when those things come into fruition. That's really when those things happen. And it's obviously we're not going to change the world here, but I think it's important to have public conversations. I think it's how you affect the world in a positive manner.
Now, what about rhetoric?
Rhetoric, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I had two beers. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fun.
But
I go with the woo-why approach, I think, myself.
But I mean, another way you affect the world is you hack elections. And like I said before, everybody's doing it, not just the Russians. No,
Yeah,
but
all
I
the
mean,
cool kids are doing it.
Does that make it right? Are we going to
doesn't-
take the
it doesn't-
Lance Armstrong's place and be like, oh, everybody else is doing it? I just had to do it. 'cause
Lance Armstrong went along with it.
it doesn't make it right, just like, spying on people doesn't make it
Yeah.
right, but everybody does it.
The U.S. has been rigging elections for decades. Just go down and check in Central America.
That's what I was
Find
saying.
out.
Yeah.
No, forget rigging elections. You have overthrows of
insurrection.
democratically elected governments. Full on has happened.
Yeah, a lot worse than hacking elections, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Yeah, I mean, what do you guys want to make some final remarks? Like raise any other or any other points that you want to talk about just briefly before we're done? Or I mean, I'm looking forward to our next discussion next week. I mean, it was really a pleasure to talk to you guys. I think it was a lot of fun.
I think 10 years from now, the world will be both a better and worse place than it is today. That's my stalwart prediction.
Place your bets here.
Yeah.
Here, yes.
Yeah, but if the world
Betting
ends,
on
we
the
can't.
future of the world.
I mean,
think
look, if I bet that 10 years from now the world's going to end and I'll place $1,000 bet, that's a losing bet because I'll never collect. Even if
Yeah.
I win, I don't.
Oh, that's true. That's
Yeah.
my
I-
bet. Yeah,
I either
Yeah,
lose
it's a
outright
best
or
odds
I
wager.
lose
that's not a
outright.
good bet. Yeah, because you won't collect if you win.
Yeah.
Right,
I
yeah,
think
pretty
I
much.
have no idea what's going to happen in the next 10 years.
Yeah. I'm
That's
just
it.
going to say, I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords. So.
I barely know what happened in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that,
One thing I wanted to mention is I feel like the things that help us are very similar in many ways to addictions. And so often it's hard to distinguish the two. And I feel like that's a lot of the problem that we're having these days.
Oh, no, it is.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I mean, that's completely the Huxley.
Nietzsche
Right.
agrees.
Yeah. They gave everybody Soma. They literally drugged everybody in Huxley. And
Man,
we're-
we should have talked about Brave New Worlds this year because you're really into that these days. But next time.
I'm not necessarily into it. I feel like I'm living it.
Well, we're all living it. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing that I'm largely guilty of, and my wife tells me this pretty much every day, ever since this pandemic started, I play too many video games. Everybody's playing a lot of video games.
I'm not.
I'm not.
I'm not
But I am going to go and watch Amazon.
When I say everybody, I mean a lot of people.
all the cool kids.
Everybody that
Like,
counts, Frank.
What's up?
Everybody that counts.
yeah.
Oh,
The cool
that's
kids,
good.
yeah.
No true Scotsman
Hey,
Scotsman
I can
fallacy.
count into
Plays-
the transfinite
No, Drew
level.
Scottman plays Settlers of Catan. I mean, what is that? I'm just
Uh,
saying I am going to go on Amazon Prime after
What's
this. and
your
watch
vice
the
though?
movie.
I'm sure you have a vice.
I do.
So we all have like pandemic vices. I'm sure.
Oh, mine's spending money. Whew, boy, I've been terrible.
Yeah. Mine was going
Lion
to the
shit.
gym. Now I have to find another one. So
Well, I mean, going to the gym is pretty
Well-
pretty good.
I mean, I
Let
bought
me
this
just-
thing so that on the 21st I can go watch the conjunction through it and see if
Oh,
I can
that's
take
great.
pictures and
That's
I
stuff.
thought you were going to
awesome.
do like a rear window thing.
I'm sure you did, because you're still thinking about those bad places on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my vice. I'm going to go on the.
Yeah, I get Craig and Jimmy Stewart mixed up all the time.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me just say thank you guys for letting me participate. I have enjoyed this conversation a lot. I'm sorry that I talk so much. I set out to just listen, but that didn't work
I mean,
out.
it's okay, David. I mean, it's nice that you talked. You're a very interesting person to listen to. So you shouldn't apologize about that.
Please,
Well-
all a bunch of windbags here.
yeah, exactly.
There are a lot of problems in the world, and they need solving, and they need minds like yours to consider them. And these discussions have much more effect than you think. Even though there's just 6 of us here, each of us knows other people. And the things that we have discussed here tonight impact the way we will express ourselves to those other people all the time. And so this actually is doing something about the problems that we see in the world, just discussing them, in my opinion.
Yeah, truth. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like a social network.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, social
We
media.
should start one of those.
that we could be evil too.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is a social network these days, for sure. I mean,
Do
we're
no
all
evil.
in it.
Yeah. Just
It's-
how do we monetize it?
It's how we do it. It's like, do we do it for good? Do we do it for evil?
I think
or
everything's
bad?
been a social network for probably about 25,000 years or
Yeah.
so. It's just how large the network is. But
I'm just saying, Bruno, were you just saying this is how we do it? Were you saying this is how we do it? This is how we
we've been memed.
Bill Big
All right.
Bro here.
Well,
All
I'm gonna take off, y'all.
Okay, well, have a good
Oh, I
night.
think we all are actually.
Yep.
So this was
My
the-
last thought is we drove off Carolyn.
This was
All
the,
right.
Yeah,
the end. This
Good
was
I feel
talk.
Thank
badly
you.
about that.
And,
Thanks for showing up, David.
Yeah.
Good
yeah,
seeing the
thanks
rest
for
of you.
showing up, everybody.
Yeah.
I'll see you.
And,
Have a good night.
I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.